Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday's edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And with me so far today, I have Danielle McMahon and Bobby Cobb, and I'm Miriam Siegel. We're going to be talking about presence. What a surprise! We're going to be talking about presence and vigilance. And we were having a little conversation before we went live about the difference between vigilance and hypervigilance and what any of that has to do with presence. So I thought we could start there. What I'm noticing is Bobby looks like he's frozen.
Well, I'm still hearing you guys. Can you hear me? Okay.
We can hear you,
but you're
but your face is, you look like a very happy Santa Claus.
yes.
Well, we can hear you and you can hear us, so I guess we can still talk, and then maybe your picture will start moving, or you'll just it's your way of being
frozen in
vigilant.
that smile.
I'm going to try to refresh here real quick and see if that's
Okay. Oops. Okay.
Well,
Well,
now
Danielle,
he's gone too. Okay.
he got very vigilant for a moment. I love StreamYard and the internet. It's so much fun. He's trying to come in again, just for ladies and gentlemen, that whoever's watching. Bobby's trying to come on, and there's no picture at all.
Oh, boy.
He's there in the background, but we can't see him. I'm going to bring you in, Bobby, just in case you can hear us, but
I can hear you guys fine. I don't know what's going on at my
you're
end.
not there.
Your name is there.
Your name is there. Okay.
And
Well,
then there's something.
You're
Malcolm
so
didn't come
vigilant,
back
you're
either.
invisible. Well, there we are.
Come on.
So it's you and your green screen. Maybe that's the way it needs to be right now.
Maybe so.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
So we've been vigilant to the moment as we're waiting for you. And I'm already, the minute I say waiting, practically anytime I say waiting, I hear Eckhart Tolle laughing, because he's always when I was at one of his retreats, and I'm so happy to be going back. I'm going to be going to another retreat in September. When I was at one of his retreats, and I mean, he doesn't always show up on time, like when it's supposed to start at 2:00, his session, then he doesn't always show up at exactly 2:00. And so he'll come in and sit down, and it's all very sort of quiet and slow, and whatever things happen, and all of a sudden he'll just look and go. So have you been waiting? It's just his way of saying you're not present, are you? So I just thought I'd digress for a moment, because I mentioned the word waiting, and I tend to connect to him when it comes to waiting, because it's not really waiting, it's being present to whatever's happening in the moment. And then I don't have to wait, and then I don't even have to feel impatient or anything. But that wasn't today's topic. Today's topic is vigilance. Well, kind of it was. Today's topic is presence and vigilance. And as we were mentioning, not hypervigilance, although we can speak about that. Vigilance in respect of being aware and alert to what is. Okay, we've got Malcolm coming in. Yay! And we're going to see what happens, because for those of you who are watching, we were having some technical sound problems. And it was all Malcolm's fault. So we're going to bring Malcolm in again and see what happens. Hi, Malcolm.
Hello. Are we still having an issue?
No,
Everybody
it
start
sounds like
talking.
it's resolved.
It sounds much better now.
Oh, this is great. It's working. Yay. Nice to have you here without all the extra reverb and stuff.
It's nice to be here.
So does anybody want to talk about the difference between vigilance and hypervigilance before we get into the presence and vigilance thing?
I don't know that I could define it, but I like the distinction, because initially when we were talking about this as a topic, I was thinking the way that I was thinking of vigilance, I think in my mind, I categorized it more as hyper vigilant, even though I'm not confident that I could define either of those words, although the hyper part just seems like alert to the surroundings, but through a prism of I guess you could be vigilant about something good, but it just feels to me like it's more frequently associated with something bad might be happening, and we need to be on the lookout. Maybe that's having read Harry Potter's book with Mad-Eye Moody. He was always telling Potter, constant vigilance, Potter.
That's a good comparison. Yeah, I mean, I'm a psychotherapist, among other things, and work with people who've experienced trauma, which is basically most everybody. And there's often a kind of need to be hyper vigilant instead of just alert and aware and noticing what's going on as part of a daily being in the world. There's that having to pay attention, extra attention, in order to ward off any particular danger that might come our way. That's a hyper vigilance. It's like constantly having to be on the alert to protect oneself from something that might or might not happen. Whereas vigilance will be, as we mentioned, this just sort of being aware, noticing.
Well, of course, everybody deals with a certain level of vigilance, and there's certain situations to where, you know what I'm saying, the hypo vigilance would be, you know what I'm saying, because you know there may be a danger, or you have a sense that there is a true danger there, and you know what I'm saying. So vigilance, you know, I think that's just everybody, man. Everybody has a level of it. And, you know, we can get into the chemicals in the brain and how that reacts and all that, depending on what you've been through in life. I know for me, you know what I'm saying, being military, well, retired and all that, is certain situations where, you know, I go from being watchful to alert, right? You know, for a while there, I couldn't do big crowds. Like I couldn't go to the mall, or I couldn't go to a concert or something like that, right? Because I would go to a different level of awareness. Or, you know, I go to a totally different, and it wasn't really necessary. But in my mind, it was necessary, right? Because I was conditioned, I was trained to be that way. So, you know what I'm saying? Vigilance is not a bad thing. Hypervigilance really isn't a bad thing. It depends on where you at, the situation, the time,
the
the
context.
space. Right. So to be vigilant of something, right, is smart, in my opinion, right? It's just being smart, you know, being mindful, being aware of what's going on and what, you know, the possibilities are, right? You know, you're more attentive and awareness when you're driving, you know, 115 miles an hour than you are when you're when you're driving 50, right? So, you know, that's just to me, it's just, you know what I'm saying, when you get into the hypervigilance, I think that's when you have to get to that point where you need to talk to somebody. If you're of hypervigilance, that's when you need to talk to somebody, because you know, there's not always a bear behind the bush, right? So, you know, I just think there's a time that you need to speak with somebody or talk to somebody about what's going on with you. Because I had that problem with PTSD and all that. I had that issue, right? I couldn't separate, right? And we all have triggers that take us there.
Right.
And, you know, and you have to talk to somebody. You got to talk to somebody, because if you don't talk, because you have to draw the image in your head. You got to go back through deprogramming or decluttering, whatever that is that makes that trigger take you there.
There's an interesting distinction there, and thank you for that. This idea of context is like, when is it appropriate to be hypervigilant, and when is it appropriate to just be vigilant? I mean, I tend to say to people, if they've been to sessions with me, depending on what we've done, I will remind them to be sufficiently outer focused so that they notice cars and other people and that kind of thing when they leave the office. Because sometimes you're really into yourself. We've done some sort of work where they're noticing really what's going on with them, and then they walk out the door still noticing only what's going on, and some car can fly by. So it's good to be vigilant in the respect of aware, present to what's going on around you, without being hyper vigilant. In other words, when it's not appropriate, looking for a danger that isn't there. a car going by is not dangerous unless it is in a certain situation, like you're standing in the middle of the road or a child runs out in the street or something like that. So there's not necessary to be hypervigilant, but vigilant, so that we notice a sufficient amount of our surroundings when what's going on with us. For example, if there's something going on in my body and I need to go to the doctor, then all of a sudden I could become hypervigilant if I were living in the future and being afraid of something, right? If I put some context that it hasn't happened yet. For anybody who didn't hear that, there was a plane flying over Malcolm.
That wasn't me.
That was really good. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. A hypervigilance would be almost noticing too much, being too aware, and spinning off into hypothetical situations of, oh, I'm dying now, or this is really serious, or whatever, when we don't know. And that's the beauty of being just vigilant and aware of what's going on, present to what is, without spinning off into the hyper part of it. I actually want to ask you, Danielle, and I do this every once in a while, so just tell me if I'm being a pain, but because we've spoken a bit about your work with horses and how they notice and how you need to be with horses or they won't react or they will react or whatever. And I have a sneaking suspicion that hypervigilance and horses don't really go well together.
Well, not in relationship to humans, certainly. Maybe in their herd, in their natural setting, it's sort of probably the alpha mare's role to be hypervigilant, right? In my little bitty herd that I have a mare whose mother was here. She was foaled here. The horse I have now was foaled here, so I had her mother, and she was a very good alpha mare. Like, she had control of her little herd all the time. She knew what to react to and what not to, and what to shut down, and she was very subtle about how she did it. This mare, her daughter, was groomed then to be the alpha mare. So when she left, the mom left, and the daughter was the alpha mare of the herd now. She always had a second. So she had this mare, she had that mare, and those two mares are gone now. And for a good solid 6 months last year, after my mare died, who was her current second, she was hypervigilant.
Yeah.
And she dropped a few riders.
Oh, wow.
Because she would just react so quickly. And that's not who she had been previous to that. So she had a new set of circumstances where she felt like she had to be looking for the fear and reacting quickly all the time. And that it does correlate very well with people, as Malcolm was talking about, there's not a bear behind every bush, or whatever it was that he said. That's exactly what you don't want your horse to be doing, right? Don't be looking for the bear behind every bush. Just let me help you navigate this environment. If you have concerns, look to me. If I have concerns, I'll look to you, and we'll work it out and keep one another safe. If you have that kind of feeling about the relationship, it's going to be very different than if you have the filter, like Bobby was talking about. It's like looking through a filter of fear, right? So hypervigilance is looking through that filter of fear, whereas vigilance is just being alert. It's a very different feel to the relationship then.
So someone who would want to ride and is hypervigilant. I mean, some people are afraid. They may want to ride, but they're also afraid. Is there some sort of relationship that can be established between the rider, the hypervigilant rider, and the horse, so that the horse doesn't become hypervigilant, or does the horse reject the rider, or what kind of?
So the original mare that I had, that was a really good alpha mare. She was also very good with beginning riders. She was what I call a babysitter personality. If you were that hypervigilant person, she would pick up on it, but she wouldn't reflect it back in her behavior. She would handle it. And she would handle it for you, right? This mare doesn't do that. If the daughter, if you are hypervigilant and you get on her, she's going to be hypervigilant. She's just going to mirror directly back to you that. So it's different in their own personalities as it is in our personalities as well.
That's really cool.
The other thing that really landed for me as you were talking is that both my daughter and her husband have this sort of hyper vigilant tendency. So maybe it's a bit of conditioning, but he's also retired military or left the military, but he went to military school and was in the military for a period of time. And now he's an EMT. So he's very much in worst case scenario kind of thinking, right? And very much going to tend to that. So my daughter and their young son were going to go to a political rally, and he was like, blah, don't take my young son to a political rally. That's where things like this happen, right? And she's like, I'm going, enjoy my life for a day. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Because she feels that way about him being on the job.
Mm.
Right. So every day he leaves for his job, she has a little bit of that hypervigilance as he had that day with them. So.
That is a really interesting comparison, and the opportunity to be in another's world, right, and experience what the other person experiences, at least to a certain degree, and understand better. I think that would be an opportunity for a deepening of a connection in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be an opportunity for a lot of arguments.
It all worked out well. There was nothing horrible at the political rally. The baby and she were fine. So it was all good. And he's so far come back from work every day. So
yeah. Yeah. It kind of plays into the idea of waiting, this sort of worrying, this idea of vigilance as worrying, living in the future. Something bad might happen, and so I have to worry, as if that's going to do anything other than cause you stress. It's this idea of, if I worry, then I have some sort of control. Malcolm, I see your finger. In a positive way.
Yeah, as I sit here and I think about it, when you're in the vigilance stage, yeah, I mean, there's details there, right? There's details that you're looking for. There's signs that you're looking for, and that's left brain, right? Once you get into hypervigilance, you invoke the imagination, right? So you're reacting from the right brain, which is imaginary and how good or how bad something could be, and you know what I'm saying? And then your left brain comes back and says, okay, this is what we have to do to prepare for it, right? And then, of course, you got the amygdala in your brain just screaming about everything. But, you know what I'm saying? So, you know what I'm saying? So, it's how you imagine it that triggers the hyper, right? Just your normal vigilance is left brain, data, information, okay, nothing, there's a dark shadow there, whatever. But once you trigger that imagination into it, I think that's when you go into the hypo vigilance.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It's the fantasizing about possible catastrophes or whatever.
Yeah.
So Bobby, you have a group called Our Mindful Life, and you talk a lot about mindfulness and presence and that sort of thing. And you have lots of exercises and meditations and stuff. When our topic is presence and vigilance, how does vigilance help presence? How does vigilance help us be mindful, in your opinion or your experience?
Interestingly, one thing that came to mind when you were talking about doing your work and then kind of having to wake people up so that they can go out and function in the world, that they're not traveling through the world, in this deep meditative state, and so deep that they're virtually unaware of the things that are going on around them. I do that when I do hypnotherapy as well. I need to make sure that they're up and out and alert. And, we have some uptime exercises when they're done to get them re-engaged. However, I also teach meditation. And in that meditation, one of the things that I encourage people to do, we have a Wednesday night meditation that goes very deep. And people just, many people report that it's like the best part of their week. And it's a perfect way to break up their week and help them get through what otherwise might be a more stressful week. And I actually suggest to them the opposite, that as they're coming out of meditation, come back into the room from wherever it's, wherever you've been on the journey in the theater of your imagination, but come out no more quickly than you can bring this peace and tranquility and clarity that we've cultivated with you. And I always invite them, kind of challenge them a little bit to see how far can you go. And people routinely report that they, our meditation goes from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And people routinely report that they were able to carry this peace and tranquility with them through the rest of the evening. It currently is pretty rare that people are still waking up in that state. And I believe to do that, just as we're having this conversation, vigilance is a key ingredient, that you've got to be aware of your own, vigilant to your own internal experience, how you're processing the external stimuli to see, okay, is this pulling me out? Am I time traveling? Do I suddenly find myself worrying about the meeting that I've got tomorrow morning or on Friday? Or, am I thinking, oh my God, tomorrow's Valentine's Day and I haven't gotten anything yet, blah, blah, blah. All of those time travel type stuff, that it just occurs to me that vigilance can also be used, just monitoring our own experience. And I had an interesting experience yesterday. I got a email from somebody that I haven't talked to in over a year. We're friends, more or less. We're just not in, each other's space that much. And it was a very accusatory email that I was being blamed for some things that were going on in her life. And she was asking questions to say, it occurred to me that you may have been the one that did this. And I wasn't. And in fact, it was the exact opposite. But it was weird just in that moment watching. Hit me right, like I wake up at 8 o'clock, and that's when on the weekends, and that's when my do not disturb goes off. So it literally, like right when I got up, the little ping from the text came in, and I normally am good about not looking right away, but this time I wasn't. I looked and I started to engage in that, and I could just feel myself. Anger was arising, and I was kind of pissed, and it had a bad taste in my mouth, and all of that. And I was watching that happen, so it was almost as though two realities were taking place. I was in the moment of the text and allowing this anger and frustration and indignation and just a whole bunch of what we would typically call negative emotions. And I was allowing them to come, and I was just watching going, wow, that's a strong reaction that you're having there, which, gave me the opportunity for a little self-inquiry to go, what's going on? You didn't do this. There's no question in my mind that I wasn't the one, and maybe nobody was the one that she's looking for somebody to blame. But I know it wasn't me, and yet nevertheless, there was upset that was coming. So it was interesting just to watch our internal experience. And in fact, that's one of the exercises that when I begin working with somebody, we are trained out of, we are conditioned out of checking in with ourselves. You know, if somebody asks you how you're doing, our conditioning tells us, go ahead and give a positive response. Say you're being great, fake it until you make it. And nobody wants to hear your complaints anyway. So we just tend to gloss over how we're feeling. But the moment that we begin to notice our reactions, I think that's one of the most powerful exercises that we can do to invite more presence into our life.
Mm-hmm.
Seems
Yeah, thank you.
Hypervigilance can be an excellent tool to pull you out of presence. Vigilance can be a wonderful tool to bring you into it. I think, yeah.
When can you hear me? Anyway, when we have our classes or whatever, right? There's a point. There's a certain class that I give, and it's like the mental mind platter or the mental platter. And in that mental platter, you have check in and check out, right? Check in is more on the line of what Bobby was referring to, is to check in with yourself, right? See how you're doing. So if somebody do ask you the question, like, how are you doing today or whatever, right? I mean, truthfully answer the question, right? Because you hear yourself saying, well, I'm upset about something, right? And then ask yourself why you upset about it. You don't have to ask it out loud, but just ask why, why am I upset? Or if they ask you why you upset, right? And if you don't feel like answering, don't answer it. But your brain is automatically going to try to find the answer, right? That chatter you hear in your brain, that's going to become part of that chatter. But you also have what we call check out, right? And check out is when you go to, you hear people say, like, they may have a picture of a certain place, or they have this image in their head of their free zone, and they might be thinking about the islands or something like that. And every day you should go there, right? And not stay there forever, but maybe when you feel yourself feeling tense, when you feel yourself feeling some kind of way, go there, right? And there is where you let it go, right? Because you don't want to take this into that zone, right? You don't want to take this into that your checkout zone, right? I'm checking out. I'm done. You know what I'm saying? So what, well, but when you check in with yourself and why am I going through that? Because you got to understand, sometimes you have to check your vigilance and you have to check your hypervigilance, right? You have to be aware. You have to be aware of the awareness, if that, you feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and becoming aware of the awareness makes you even more aware, right? Because sometimes you have to go back and you have to, okay, what triggered me, right? What made me get here, right? Because you ever like wonder why, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you mad, you upset. You're like, why am I mad? Somebody triggered you at 8 o'clock that morning. Somebody said something to you, done something to you like at 8 o'clock, 8:30 that morning. And you've been carrying this for the last however many hours, right? And not knowing it. And then you're trying to figure out, what am I mad about? And then, once you identify it, then you can move on past it. And, and that's what, like for us, right, is identifying it. Once we identify it, and then ask the question, right? You always got to ask the question. And, the question can come in any form, right? Depending on how you talk to yourself, right? So, you got to identify it and ask the question. And this is part of, like, when I got guys with PTSD, I got guys with issues like that. This is what I try to teach them, what I try to get them to do, because that's what I had to do, right? I had to get to a point that I trusted myself to answer the question. And once I answered the question, right, now I can really evaluate it. I can really look at it like, was that even worth getting mad about? Right? I mean, seriously, because even my marriage was at risk at a certain point, because I never asked myself the question. I just accepted the anger, and I just, you know what I'm saying? I'm just mad
trying
about
to power through. Yeah.
I'm mad about stuff that I really didn't care about, but I just felt like I should have been mad about it, so I got mad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but honestly, deep in my heart, deep in my soul, I didn't care about it. You know what I mean? So you know what I'm saying? Once you get to a point, you realize like I'm mad about a bunch of stuff that I really don't care about. So that starts to help you with that process of getting through.
Well, and one thing that you said there, Malcolm, on the checking out, that reminded me of a boss that I had almost 30 years ago now, gosh. And one of the things that he noticed in me at that particular time was I didn't really have a very good ability, or at least I hadn't tapped into it yet, to check out. I was like almost always on. This was a job that required anybody performing it to be almost always on. And like his first thing in mentoring me was, when you check out, you need to check all the way out. And God, I can't even imagine what it would be like as connected as we are to everything now, because we didn't have that then. We had cell phones, but there was no texting even, and there wasn't much of an internet. And I hadn't ever gone on a real vacation. You know, I would take 5 days off, but I would bring a little work with me, and I'd be checking in with the office and putting out fires. And I never really was on vacation. And this guy introduced me to the importance of checking out and those little mental breaks. There's a great in that movie Collateral with Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise. Jamie Foxx does that. He's got this little island, peaceful island place, and man, he just takes a little mental vacation to paradise anytime he feels like he needs it, and that really helps him keep focused and present and doing all of that. And we can't really turn things all the way on if we never give ourselves the opportunity to shut down and recharge and create the space to power back up again and fully recharge our batteries.
Yeah, because when you get into your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, it's about, it's about, bringing the serotonin levels, flush. It's about getting that dopamine. Because when you check out and you go to that space, right, your dopamine levels rise, right? So your serotonin stress levels, they level off. So, so you're not so anxious. You're not so whatever the case is, right? So I know for me, military wise, as a non-commissioned officer, right? My thing was people didn't understand how I could flip it on and flip it off, right? Because, like right now I might not need it, so I'll flip it off. But as soon as I take 3 steps out the door, pop, I got to have it on, right? I got to, I got to be able to, I got to be able to direct. I got to be able to do what I got to do. But once you get out of the military, right, you've done it for 20 years. You've done it for 15, 20, 22, in my case, 22 years, right? Flip on, flip off, flip off, flip off, to the point that, there's no reason to flip it on, really. You know what I'm talking about? But because of habit, out of habit, you're used to finding reasons to flip it on and then flip it off, right? So, and it's like a high, it's like it's like a drug. You got to have it, right? You got to have that rush of, serotonin or dopamine or whatever the case is. You got to have it because you've created a habit of getting that flux of chemicals that when you don't have it and you don't have a reason, you create reasons. Mentally, you create reason, and you start imagining things, and that's when you go from one stage to the hypo stage, right? And then how do you get to that point? How do you cut it off? And that's what we have to learn. That's what I had to go through a process of learning.
That's like when people talk about being addicted to drama. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm so used to chaos and every kind of thing happening that when nothing's happening, I have to create something, I have to cause a problem, and then I feel actually better because I'm used to chaos. So I feel better in chaos. Although I don't like chaos, I just feel better when there is some. And people can go like that, like adrenaline junkies. That's another expression of it that I've heard. It's that sort of being hooked on excitement and something always happening and not realizing that that might be connected to lengthy stint with trauma.
You'll be amazed at how many people actually go through this every day, right? And don't realize it, right? Yeah. They gotta have the drama, they gotta have the what's up argument, they gotta have, you know what I'm saying? And and it goes the other way too, as far as the what we call the Superman or the hero syndrome, right? I gotta save somebody today. I have to, right? I have to, you know what I'm saying? And then you wonder why you tired because you don't walk around here flying around trying to save everybody, right? You know what I'm saying? And then you wonder why here it is 7 o'clock, you dead tired. You know what I mean? You've been lifting people and flying people around the city all week.
You've been fighting battles all day.
Windmills like Don Quixote, right?
Yeah. So
start a war that isn't there. Yeah, and I actually noticed I spent a lot of time looking at people who drink coffee, who are used to drinking coffee and starting their day with coffee, and noticing like coffee because it gets you a bit hyper. Right? Oh. Siri is asking me if she can help me. When they drink coffee to kind of hyper themselves up because it's quiet. Like some people say, oh, I need my morning coffee because they're tired. But I've noticed some people will go for coffee because nothing's happening. They're calm and they need something to get their system going, to give them the illusion of perhaps, like, I don't want to say chaos, but yeah, some hyperactivity that they think is sort of an indication that they feel alive. And that's not really what's going on there. Yeah, it's like giving themselves a shot of adrenaline to get things pumping instead of actually just breathing into being present to the calmness and the emptiness and the whatever you feel when nothing is happening.
Yeah. Once again, it's like in the military, every morning you got to get up and you got to go do, you got to do PT or physical training. So every morning, you know what I'm saying? You're getting up, you're going to do physical training every morning. And then Saturday comes, right? You know what I'm saying? You don't have to get up and do it. So you just get up and do some push-ups, or you get up and do sit-ups, or you get up and go for a run just because, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's not even a requirement. But after you've done it for so long, like I said, it creates a habit. And that habit, just like coffee drinking, just like anything else that we do on a regular, right, is a habit, right? You've created a habit of having that level of stress. And when you don't have that level of stress, right, no matter how small or how big that level of stress is, you feel like something's missing. And so it actually is. There's a part of you that's missing because that's what you're used to every day, right? I got a grandson. He's like this every morning. He's that's him. And one day he got up and he was like just laying around, loafing around. That's how I knew something was wrong with him. You know what I'm saying?
Something's off.
Yeah, something was wrong. And that's how we are as adults, right? Especially, you know what I'm saying, the ones that get up and get coffee to get that hype up. And then when they get to work, they're like, hey, Jane, hey, oh, hi. You know what I'm talking about? Boom. Right? But then when you come to the door and you're like, what's the matter? You didn't have your coffee this morning? You feel what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's just creating those habits. And those habits are what creates, from those habits, can create fears and phobias that are not true.
Yeah.
Right? So there's something to think about, I guess.
Yeah, habits can be really interesting. And, we tend to think of them as good habits or bad habits. It could be an interesting shift to think of them as useful versus non-useful. And like getting to that point with exercise, people that I know who have been sedentary and then get into a habit, even if it's just walking for 30 minutes every day, it doesn't take too long. And Malcolm, you may know some stats on this, but people tend to get like there's a little switch that flips, that it goes from something that they have to do, and there may be a brief time that it's something that they get to do, but then it goes back to something that, like, now their body is requesting that they do it, and they start to feel agitated if they're not doing it.
Yeah, that's like my clients, right? When I first get them, right? They first come to me, and after we go through all the paperwork and all that, and I say, okay, meet me at the gym at this time, right? Or meet me at the park. The first 2 weeks, oh my God, they whining, they crying, they doing whatever, but we keep pushing, right? We keep pushing. Week 3 and 4, because it takes 21 to 28 days to create a habit. So your brain is going to fight you for that first week or two, because your brain like, hey, what are we doing? We don't do this. We used to sitting on the couch watching TV. What we doing, right? So your brain is going to fight you for that first 2 weeks. It's going to fight against you, hoping that you give up. But then as soon as you give up, guess what the brain going to say? Why you give up?
Yeah.
We was doing good, right? So, what I'm saying? But once you get past that third and fourth week, right, you built the muscle memory. Right? You built the muscle memory. You built a habit of creating that dopamine, creating them chemicals in your body when you're working out, that when you don't have it, your body's like, yo, what we doing now? You know what I'm saying? So, and that's what it's about when it comes to almost anything, is you create these habits, you form the brain, right? You shape your brain. Believe it or not, it don't take long to shape your brain. So when you shape your brain, and so your brain is like, yo, all right. You know what I'm saying? After about 2 weeks, your brain is like, all right. Because you notice the first 2 weeks, they're like, oh, drained. They're just hurting. They're crying. Coach, I'm sore. Meet me at the gym today. You know what I'm saying? But after about the third week or whatever, you know what I'm saying? It might be a mile or a mile and a half that they were struggling with, right? But the next thing you know, they're ready to go 2 miles. They're ready to try 3 miles. I let them go as far as they think they can go. But you know what I'm saying? But, right, they're ready to go that extra, you know what I'm saying, extra. So once they go through that and they go as far as they can go, guess what? The brain stops them. Okay, we've done enough. Nope, keep going. Right? Keep going. And then that takes another 2 weeks. And then you guys got to keep going through the process until they get to where they need to be. Right? So it's just about habits and creating those habits, adjusting those habits. And when we get back to the topic of discussion, is to avoid the hypo, right? Try to avoid getting into that hypo, right? Because the hypo is just your imagination. And the brain will let you see what you want to see. The brain will generate whatever it is you think behind that bush, you're going to see it, right? And then when you get there, it's like, no, it's not there, right? So, you know what I'm saying? So you can't let your imagination go there with you, because then you're going to see things and hear things and feel things that's not real, right? Like when my people work out, right? They say they're in pain. That's their brain. They're not really in pain. That's their brain creating a pain, right? So I tell them stop, take deep, three or four deep breaths. How you feel? Let's go, right? It's just to calm the brain down, and then we keep it moving. It's the same thing with what we're talking about today. You just got to calm down. You got to catch yourself, identify it, and build the muscle memory to get beyond it.
So when it comes to vigilance, like when you guys are talking about sports and that sort of thing, and time travel, there's and habits. So you've got this old habit that's not really serving you. That's the non-training habit. And then you're building up a new habit, which is the training habit. Isn't there a certain amount of vigilance or awareness focused on time travel?
Yes.
Because it's like, I want to get to a certain place or a certain physique or a certain level of health or whatever. Like there's a being present to a future in a way, or at least a desired future. And where in heaven's name does that fit into presence practice? Because there's okay, I'm this or have been this, and now I'm going towards this.
Okay. Before you can get past this, you have to see this, right? You have to see where you're going. You have to see it what we
But
call
how is that present? How is that being present, Malcolm?
how is it present?
How is that being present?
Because
If
you're
I'm
there.
seeing something in the future,
Right.
that's not now.
No. But you're present in that future. You are present in that future because you're tapped into your imagination. Your imagination can't tell the difference between what is actual and what you are imagining. So you are present in that's where you are. You're there. When you start imagining stuff, you're there. Right? You ever been somewhere and you got lost in your imagination? You can smell the flowers, or you could, you know what I'm saying, you can feel the rain, or you could, you know what I'm saying? Like you're there. Honestly believe that you're there. Spiritually, you're there. Physically, you're here. But spiritually, mentally, you're there. And if you really give it time, you really get into it, you can feel, right? That's why when they tell you, like in business, right, they say, see where you're going, get there, visualize it, right? Feel it, right? Because you don't generate enough energy from this space to get you there, to get you where you want to be. You do not generate, you personally right now do not generate enough, if we want to call it dimensions, right? It's, you know, if you want to break it down into dimensions, right? You got your first dimension, which is the past, your second dimension, which is the present, and then your third dimension, which is the future, right? You cannot generate, you right now do not have enough energy to get you to that next level, to get you to the future, right? You have to tap into the future in order to generate the energy and happiness and joy and all that stuff in order to propel you from this level to that level. Y'all with me?
Yep.
So, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, the thing about the past is a lot of people stay wrapped up, get lassoed up to the past, right? The past is what you learn from. Your past is what you learn from. Your present is where you are. And your future is where you go. But you have to know where you're going. See, half the people that's trying to be successful in this world, right, don't have an idea of where they're going. And they think that they have enough energy on this plane, on this level, to pull themselves up. By the time you pull yourself there, you're going to be tired as hell and ain't going to be worth nothing. You know what I mean? So, you know what I'm saying? So you have to tap into that. You have to tap into whatever that is that you want to be, that you want to happen, or whatever the case is, and allow it to pull you. Allow the emotions of having the things that you desire, the emotions of having the money, you know what I'm saying, of you know what I'm saying, the energy behind it, right, to pull you to it. And it will pull you to you. Whatever you want in life wants you. Whatever you desire in life desires you. The only thing is, right, you have to it can't physically come do it for you. You have to physically do the work, right? You have to physically do the work. So, you know what I'm saying, you know, and what Merriam was saying is, right, you know, basically, you know, you have to tap into a different energy, a total different energy. And the best energy to tap into is the energy of where you want to be, right? Plus your spiritual energy, if you believe in so, right? Right. So, you know what I'm saying? So you got to tap into that energy. And the only way to tap into that energy is you got to tap into your imagination. Your imagination got to be connected to the heart. The heart got to be connected to the gut. The gut got to be connected to your bowels, et cetera, right? Now we start talking about the chakras, right? This way, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, because if you don't get this first, right, you never get the.
Oh, Malcolm just went
We've
quiet on
lost
my
your
end.
sound, Malcolm.
No volume.
No volume. While Malcolm is trying to figure out the sound, we can't hear you all of a sudden. Anybody else want to get in on this? The idea of time travel and presence and vigilance?
Yeah. So I think that there can be a negative to that if you are if you're time traveling out and thinking to yourself, everything's going to be wonderful once I've hit a certain goal, whatever that goal is, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of weight loss, the right shaped body, you know, whatever the goal is, you can get lost in that. and just be thinking everything's going to be okay when, and now this stuff that I'm doing is a necessary evil. Or what I felt like Malcolm was describing, and if your sound comes back, Malcolm, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but what he's back. So that'll be good. So let me just finish the thought, and then you tell me if we're on the same track or not. What I heard you saying, Malcolm, was getting into that end state energy, getting very clear on the goal, getting very clear as why the goal is important, and then being present to the journey. And so you can be in the moment with the idea that if I do these certain number of things, I may achieve this outcome, if that makes sense. So I may be able to accumulate a certain amount of money in my bank account if I'm doing a little bit extra work and saving a little bit more and watching my expenses a little bit more carefully. And then as you're checking in on a regular basis, you can be very present to that journey, meaning noticing if something's working, if it's not, noticing if this strategy is helpful or if it's not, and noticing, is that goal still important? And I can think of that. I had a weight loss thing over the summer where I had a certain number that I thought I wanted to get to, and I began working toward that number, and I got about 2/3 of the way to the number. I had lost 2/3 of the weight that I had set as my goal. And I just realized, man, right now I feel great. I like the way my clothes fit. I like the way I look in the mirror. I like the way my energy is, and I'm fine here. And I think the same thing, that with that runner example that we talked about, there becomes a point, if you are present to the journey, where the journey becomes the reward. It's like there's a moment, those first 3 weeks that, first couple of weeks that I'm meeting Malcolm at the park to go running, if Malcolm's late, probably in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, good. Well, maybe he won't show up today. Maybe he got caught in traffic and I can get out of this. And then there's a point where I'm kind of liking it. Then hopefully there gets to be a point where I'm like, where the hell's Malcolm? I'm ready to go, man. My body is just running. And then if running is the vehicle that we're using to achieve the goal, I begin to think of myself as a runner, and I'm just running now for the joy of running and benefiting from all of these positive side effects because I'm using my body in a productive way.
Yeah, the thing is, right, you can't stick with left brain thinking or right brain thinking. You have to go whole brain thinking.
Whole brain, yeah.
Right? You have to tap into your imagination. You have to, right? Anything that you're trying to achieve, if you can't imagine it, then it's probably not going to happen, right? Because when you imagine it, now you have to go through a process of, okay, how do I get there? Here I am. How do I get here? Right? What's necessary from where? Okay, I need to go back to school. Okay, I need to go get this type of certification. I need to get this, right? Now you start prioritizing the things that you've got to do to get there. Once you start achieving these small little things along the way, right, you start picking up energy. You start, saying, like, I did that. I graduated. I got this. I got that. You know what I mean? And that just builds your energy up, right? People always talking about, uplifting energy, right? Uplifting people's spirits, right? If you ever want to uplift the thing is, right? I'm a believer. This is my belief, right? That I can't motivate Miriam to do nothing. I can't, right? Miriam has to be, the only thing I can do, right, is I can uplift her above her own motivation. Once she decided to get motivated to meet me at the gym, right? Once she decided, once she get motivated enough to say, okay, I'm going to pay you, right? Now, my job at that point is to uplift you above your own motivation. How do I uplift you? I get you to physically achieve something that you mentally desire. I get you to physically achieve something that you mentally desire, and that's going to spiritually uplift you every time you achieve something. If you achieve 3 pounds, 5 pounds, 8 pounds, right? If you achieve going to the class, and because my people I give classes to, right? You go to the class and you learn something new, and I say, okay, give me 5 things that you learned today, right? And you give me 5 things off the top of your head because you were just so excited about the information. I just uplifted you, right? Above your own motivation. So, what I'm saying? So, you have to understand the 3 levels, and you have to understand first thing, you can't hold on to the past. Whatever you're going to learn from it, learn it, right? And then, whatever understand or have an understanding of where you're at, but create a plan to get to where you're going. Now live in that. Don't live in your present, because if you go by what's going on in front of you, you're going to quit every time. You're going to quit every time. Right? So anyway, let that be your happy place. Let that be your happy place. And strive for that. Whatever that is.
Well, we have come to the end of our hour. And thank you all for your contributions to the theme. I'm noticing that we can certainly have another talk about this idea of presence, not being in the present, but being in the present, and then being present to the future and not present to the past, and all of that, which actually is probably a good idea for the Presence Posse, because there can be some confusion around presence and goals, for example, as we've got into that sort of focusing on achieving a goal and being present to that. We haven't really discussed it clearly, and I think that can be a confusing place for many people when they're trying to understand presence and being aware and all of that. So that's something we can come back to. But for today, we are done for this topic, which is presence and vigilance. And I hope you have gleaned something worthwhile from our conversation. And if you like, you can certainly ask us questions in the chat in the free Presence Posse group. Just go to the Presence Posse free Facebook group and look for this particular topic, and then you can ask us questions or let us know whether you agree with us or not. And we're always willing to learn, at least I assume we are. And I'm owning and being present to my assumption. And generally speaking, we welcome your comments and your questions, and that enriches us as well. So thanks everybody for participating, and thanks to all the panelists who have been on the roundtable talk. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday for a new topic with the Presence Posse. And make sure to check out our podcast, because we have been publishing. Bobby has been doing this, which is wonderful. And we are very grateful to Bobby for all the work he has done and is doing, making sure that the Presence Posse podcasts are published so that you can watch us over and over again on any of the general podcast channels. So
it should be available anywhere. Somebody told me they did it on Alexa. Alexa, play the Presence Posse podcast.
Very
and
cool.
There we were.
I wonder, since Siri's always butting into my podcasts, I wonder if I said it to her, what she would do. I got to check that out and let y'all know.
Go ahead and try.
All right, everybody, take good care, and we'll see you next week. Thanks from us in the Presence Posse.